The hospital lobby was filled with the usual rush of patients, nurses, and worried families when suddenly the doors burst open. A poor maid, her uniform faded and shoes worn thin, stumbled inside, panting heavily as though she had run miles without stopping. Her hair was messy, her hands trembling, and sweat dripped down her forehead, but her eyes burned with determination. Startled, the security guards immediately stepped forward, blocking her path. "You can't go in there," one of them said firmly, his hand raised to stop her. For a moment, she looked small and powerless, as if the weight of the world was pressing on her frail shoulders. Yet, when she opened her mouth, her voice carried a strength that silenced everyone around. "Please, let me through," she cried, her words breaking with desperation. It wasn't just the sound of panic that stopped people in their tracks, it was the raw emotion behind it. Her voice cracked like glass, trembling but fierce, carrying a weight of urgency that couldn't be ignored. Everyone who looked into her eyes saw something deeper, something beyond fear. They saw love, pure, selfless, unshakable love that had driven her here against all odds. In that single moment, the bustling hospital lobby froze. Nurses, patients, even the guards hesitated. She was not just another frantic visitor. There was something in the way her chest heaved, the way her hands clutched together, and the way her eyes pleaded that made it clear, this woman was about to change everything. The millionaire sat slumped on a cold metal bench just outside the intensive care unit, his face buried in his trembling hands. His suit, perfectly tailored only hours ago, now looked crumpled and lifeless, much like his spirit. Around him, the steady beeping of machines and hurried footsteps of doctors only deepened his helplessness. His young son lay inside, fighting for every breath, a fragile life suspended by wires and tubes. The doctors had delivered the words that no amount of money could soften: his boy needed a rare blood type urgently, and without it, time was slipping away. For a man who owned skyscrapers, fleets of cars, and wealth beyond imagination, this was a cruel irony. He could buy anything in the world, except the one thing he needed most at this moment, a miracle. His phone lay silent on the bench beside him. He had already called every contact, every connection, every friend with influence, but all efforts ended in the same hopeless answer. His eyes were red from tears, his throat dry from begging the universe for mercy. For the first time in his life, the millionaire felt utterly powerless. His empire meant nothing here, his bank accounts couldn't save the fragile heartbeat of his only child. All he could do was wait and pray, his mind echoing with his son's laughter, his tiny hands once gripping his own. Every second that passed felt like sand slipping through his fingers, and despair was slowly breaking him apart. The sliding doors at the end of the corridor opened with a sudden clang, and all eyes turned. The same maid who had rushed past the lobby now stood before the nurse's station, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Her faded uniform was damp with sweat, her hair clinging to her forehead, but her voice cut through the sterile silence like a blade. I heard about the boy," she gasped, pointing toward the ICU. "Please, let me help. I have the same blood type." For a moment, the corridor froze. Doctors exchanged startled glances, and the nurses looked at her as if she had spoken something unbelievable. The millionaire, lifting his tear-stained face, blinked in disbelief. He recognized her instantly. She was the maid from his mansion, the woman who silently dusted his furniture, scrubbed his floors, and disappeared each evening without a word. He had passed her dozens of times, barely noticing her presence, never once considering her story. And now, here she was, standing before him with shaking hands and unwavering resolve. "You," he stammered, his voice breaking between hope and shock. The maid nodded firmly, though her legs trembled. "Take my blood. Don't waste a second." There was no hesitation in her tone, no concern for herself. The urgency in her eyes spoke louder than words, she was ready to give whatever she could to save his child's life. In that instant, the air shifted. The millionaire realized that salvation had arrived from the place he least expected. The preparations moved quickly. Nurses guided the maid into a small room, rolling up her sleeve and preparing the equipment. She sat quietly, her fingers clenched together, whispering a prayer under her breath. Her face showed no fear, only determination. On the other side of the glass, the millionaire stood frozen, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the sight of her, this woman he had always overlooked, now lying on a narrow cot, ready to give part of herself to save his son. As the needle slid into her arm, his throat tightened. He pressed his palm against the window, tears blurring his vision. Memories flashed in his mind. How many times had he walked past her in his grand hallways, never once asking if she was tired, hungry, or in pain. She had been invisible to him, a shadow in his wealthy world. And yet, at this critical moment, when all his power and riches had failed, it was her, a poor maid, who stepped forward without hesitation. His knees weakened, and he sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. But this time, his tears weren't just of despair. They carried guilt, humility, and an overwhelming gratitude. Watching her, he realized he was witnessing something money could never buy, pure kindness, born not of obligation, but of love. The millionaire whispered through his sobs, "God, forgive me. She is richer than I ever was." Hours later, the red glow above the ICU door finally turned off, and a doctor stepped out with a tired but gentle smile. "The boy is safe," he said softly. For a moment, the millionaire couldn't move, his body stiff with disbelief. Then the words sank in, and tears spilled freely as relief crashed over him. His son was alive. His world, once crumbling, had been held together by a woman he had barely noticed. The maid, pale and exhausted, was wheeled out from the donor room. Her eyes fluttered open, and she offered the faintest of smiles, as if she had simply finished another day's work. The millionaire rushed to her side, falling to his knees. His hands trembled as he held hers, his voice breaking with emotion. "You didn't just save my son," he whispered, "you saved me too." The staff watched in silence, some wiping their own eyes, as this powerful man clung to the hands of the poorest woman in the room. In that instant, there were no differences of class or wealth, only the shared humanity of two parents who would do anything for a child. From that day on, the millionaire's life changed. He ensured the maid and her family never knew struggle again. But more than wealth, he carried a new truth within his heart: compassion is the greatest treasure of all. And as he watched his son smile again, he knew he would spend the rest of his life honoring the lesson the maid had taught him, that the richest hearts are often found in the humblest homes.